Tonight, a message from Moscow that Britain has entered the war in Ukraine and could become Russia's next target. Tonight, Vladimir Putin confirms Russia has tested a medium-range ballistic missile in Ukraine for the first time and warns he could use it on Kyiv's allies.
We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities.
Here, Putin's man in London tells us escalation is the consequence for Britain allowing its Storm Shadow missiles to be used against Russia.
The UK is now directly involved in this war.
Also ahead, an arrest warrant is issued for Israel's Prime Minister over alleged war crimes. His ambassador to the UN gives me his reaction. Plus, a blow to the president-elect as Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General, Matt Gaetz, withdraws from the process amid mounting pressure. A mass poisoning in Laos claims the life of a British tourist. We'll have the latest on the case. And the filmmaker who became the face of Japan's Me Too movement with her own personal story. That's all coming up on The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Good evening. We start with a new escalation in the war in Ukraine and a direct threat to the UK. Vladimir Putin has confirmed his military tested a new medium-range ballistic missile on the battlefield. The target, the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. These pictures reportedly show the moment of that attack and the aftermath. It is the first time Russia's new hypersonic missile has been used in combat. President Putin claimed it was a direct response to this. UK-made Storm Shadow missiles and American Attacker missiles, both being used to attack Russia. Those strikes were made possible after Western allies gave Ukraine the green light. Now, Russia's president says he could use his new weapon to hit those same Western allies. So should we be concerned? Tonight, I'll bring you two crucial interviews in this story. Putin's ambassador to the UK, who tells us Britain is directly involved in this conflict, plus a man who served as Ukraine's foreign minister at the time of Russia's invasion. He tells me Russia is simply bluffing and that it's time to arm Ukraine to the hilt with no restrictions. What would the consequences of that be? We'll be live in Moscow and get the latest from Kyiv. First, though, here's Vladimir Putin addressing the nation earlier.
In response to the use of American and British long-range weapons on November 21 of this year, the Russian armed forces launched a combined strike on one of the facilities of the Ukrainian defense industry. One of the newest Russian medium-range missile system was tested in combat conditions, in this case with a ballistic missile in a nuclear hypersonic warhead. We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. And in the event of an escalation of aggressive actions, we will respond decisively. I recommend that the ruling elites of those countries that are hatching plans to use their military contingents against Russia seriously think about this.
Well, our Moscow correspondent Iva Bennett joins me now. And Iva, many in the West, at least, will be wondering if this is simply more sabre rattling.
Well, this feels like a very significant moment in the conflict tonight, Gillian, for a few reasons. One is the new weapon that Russia says has been deployed, this new hypersonic, medium-range, non-nuclear ballistic missile that Vladimir Putin says existing missile defences are incapable of intercepting. Today, the target was a military facility in the city of Dnipro, but he says more attacks could follow. The second significant thing was the substance of what he said, this new threat implying that British and American military facilities could now be attacked by Russia. His justification is that the UK and the US are now directly involved in the conflict after giving permission to Ukraine to use their long-range missiles deep up inside Russia. He's not made this threat before, but his reasoning is that it's not just the permission and the missiles they're giving to Ukraine, it's also the satellite capabilities and the operational aspect of those weapon systems. And the third thing that's really significant tonight is the setting of his address, a televised address. He doesn't do that very often. It's reserved for significant moments, like, for example, his response to the terror attack in a Moscow concert hall in March this year. And also he used that setting for, well, when he announced the full-scale invasion of Ukraine to the nation nearly 3 years ago. So those three things, the setting, the substance and the new hardware, all add up, I think, to what will be a very tense new phase in the conflict.
And Iva, earlier the Russian Foreign Ministry was refusing to comment in somewhat bizarre fashion. But what actually happened?
Yeah, a very strange moment at a briefing at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Moscow this morning. It involved the spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, who took a phone call in the middle of her briefing, interrupting her own briefing, which is pretty unusual in the first place. But the second really unusual thing was that you could actually hear the speaker on the end of the phone, on the other end of the phone, and he appeared to say, this unidentified caller appeared to tell her not to comment on the reports that Russia had used a new ballistic missile. Have a listen.
Да. Алло. Да, у меня брифинг.
Марша удар баллистическими ракетами, о чем Запад не стали говорить, не комментирую вообще.
Да, хорошо, спасибо.
So all very strange, but the confirmation we do now have that Russia has indeed used this new missile. And the question is, will this change the West's thinking? And I don't think it will, because one, I think they will have known this accusation of direct involvement would have been coming. Moscow has indicated that's their thinking for months. And secondly, I think they will have known Vladimir Putin will have felt compelled to act in some way, having made so many threats. He couldn't very well not act at all. The question, of course, is what comes next, as ever.
Indeed. Iva, thank you. Well, here, Putin's ambassador to London told us Britain was now directly involved in the war because of that decision to allow Storm Shadow missiles to be used to strike targets inside Russia. Ambassador Andrei Kelin was speaking to my colleague Mark Austin.
There were assurances that there will be no strikes deep inside the Russian territory. And what has happened, it is what we have seen. We have made multiple warnings that missiles, that it will be a serious escalation in striking inside Russia. And in spite of these, warnings, the US administration, supported by France and the UK, has made a deliberate decision to make these strikes, which seriously escalates the situation, and it can bring a collision between the nuclear powers.
But you are striking and have been striking Ukrainian cities since the beginning of the war with cruise missiles.
Well, now the subject of the day, as I say, it will be mostly a different situation. We have been assured many times by British side, we have written a note on it that they will use cruise missiles, Storm Shadow, only inside the territory of Ukraine. So what has happened is this is a deliberate cheating of us, because we have an official note on it. And now, yes, actually, this is not a responsible...
So are you saying now that Britain is directly involved in this war?
Absolutely. Britain and UK is now directly involved in this war, because this fighting cannot happen without without NATO staff, British staff as well.
But you are using Chinese dual-use technology. You're using Iranian missiles. You're using Iranian drones. You're using North Korean troops. So are you saying all those countries are now directly involved too?
You do not allow me to answer. It is
I'm just saying it can't work both ways, really.
How it works both ways. No, on that subject, I can say easily that we have plenty of mercenaries from different countries that are fighting right now on the side of Ukraine. We just have seen in Kursk area the Polish unit, which has a special uniform worn by Polish soldiers. So what's the matter?
The threat, of course, now is that President Putin could use nuclear weapons. Is that a serious threat, or is that an empty threat?
I hope that it will be carefully considered by the Western experts in order to understand what are the risks of escalations, not to underestimate them, because it is dangerous. And another thing what I would like to say in this connection is also important, that the it is, in this respect, I have to say that the Russian population is an overwhelming majority of the Russian population is supporting what has been done by the Russian leadership, and also
lowering the nuclear threshold.
And also the other very important issue is that Russian leadership is fully united.
Right. So Russia is lowering the threshold for nuclear strikes, saying it could be in response to a conventional attack. Now, therefore, that is a threat. That is an implicit threat to use nuclear weapons. Is that a grown-up thing to do? Is that a responsible thing to do?
I wouldn't say that it is per se what you are doing about the use of the nuclear weapon. The current situation will be carefully assessed by Security Council, and the President will take a decision. But I will say that, of course, it will be a response tangible and adequate after assessment of the threats to the security of the Russian Federation.
You seem to be saying that there is a possibility that there could be some sort of nuclear strike. I
haven't said that. I didn't say that, but we have many options how to respond.
Right. So on this point of escalation, it was Russia who invaded Ukraine. It was Russia who attacked energy infrastructure. It was Russia who attacked grain ships in the Black Sea. Russia who brought in North Korean troops. And it is now Russia threatening to use nuclear weapons. Isn't it Russia who is escalating this war?
That depends on from what point you count the situation in Ukraine.
Well, from the beginning of the invasion,
no,
isn't it Russia
who has started much more
escalated this
earlier?
war?
The war as such and the crisis as such has started to develop since 2014, after the coup d'etat in Kiev, which has brought illegal government over there, and some part of Ukraine did not accept it. It's this illegal government, and it was an reprisal, which has the Ukrainian government tried to kill, in fact, in bringing forces over there and shooting everywhere.
Look, there's a chance of peace. Donald Trump is coming in to the White House. He has said he can bring about peace talks in a day. I don't think that's going to happen. But do you think there is a peace deal to be done? Is President Putin ready for peace?
President Putin has said many times that we can start negotiations tomorrow if Ukraine will withdraw from regions adjacent to Russia, and it can be done. But what we hear from the other side is Boris Pistorius, defense minister of Germany, has said it is not time for peace. President Zelensky is telling every day that he is not prepared for peace.
On what terms would Russia accept peace? Under the current terms, the current territory that you have?
They have been careful.
You are occupying that territory?
No, not only. Territorial realities should be, of course, recognized. But what we need is a nuclear neutral Ukraine, nuclear-free Ukraine, a restoration of all rights of minorities over there, so no more racial discrimination, of course, cancellation of sanctions.
What if Ukraine had security guarantees from the West? Would Russia accept that Ukraine would get security guarantees from the West?
This is a matter of negotiations. As I said, we need Ukraine non-threatening to us. It should not be a breakthrough instrument as it has been done earlier.
But Russia would insist on keeping the territory it occupies now?
It is liberated territories, and in fact, it is a reality of the war which we didn't want.
Putin's ambassador to London there. Well, as I mentioned at the start of the programme, the attack in Dnipro brought about a new level of escalation from Moscow. But despite the growing threats, Ukraine's former Foreign Minister, Dmytro Kuleba, has told me it's time for the West to call Putin's bluff. He wants to see all restrictions on weapons lifted.
The overall assessment is simple. More needs to be done. We can dwell endlessly about what is possible and what is not possible, but it is true that the West has the capacity. What it lacks is still political will to deploy everything it has to help Ukraine repel Russian invasion and save Europe from greater troubles.
How worried are you about reports of an intercontinental ballistic missile being used against Ukraine?
Well, listen, we have survived so many missile attacks. And trust me, a missile barrage consisting of 100 missiles and drones being shot at you at one night is no less scarier than one intercontinental ballistic missile. I want everyone to understand one thing, that we live in this reality for 2.5 years. Every night you wake up because of the air raid siren. Every night you know that someone is going to die because of a drone or missile attack in Ukraine. We are not afraid of Putin, and I would strongly advise everyone else in the West not to be afraid of him either.
We have today the Russian ambassador saying that Britain is directly involved in the war now because of the Storm Shadow missiles, which have been sighted in Russian territory. Do you understand then why international communities might not want to jump wholeheartedly into supporting Ukraine in that way?
Well, first I would advise to stop listening to Russian ambassador for purely sanitary reasons, because what he says is constantly a lie that Moscow wants him to convey to Western public, to make it feel threatened and therefore to slow down assistance coming to Ukraine. This is the only reason behind his statements. And the reason why we have witnessed this sometimes half decisions or full decisions, but taking it later than they had to be taken, is obvious. I don't want to sound rude, but Putin has a strategy and he knows what he wants. He wants to destroy Ukraine as an independent Western democracy, and to show that to demonstrate to the whole world that the West is incapable of defending what it stands for. And while the West wants Ukraine to win in this war, but at the same time it does not want Russia to lose the war because of the possible repercussions of that loss for stability of Russia and Eurasian region.
That's a contradictory position.
Yeah, this is why we are where we are. It's not a contradictory. This is exactly why we are where we are.
But you're saying that the West doesn't want Russia to lose the war?
Yes, I'm saying that with absolute confidence, because the West is afraid that the loss of Russia in this war will mean the disintegration of Russia and all the consequences related to weapons dissemination and chaos and humanitarian crisis that this loss may lead to. And but this, you're absolutely right. This is the contradictory strategy. You pump help to Ukraine. You want Ukraine to succeed and to remain democratic country and part of the West, but at the same time you are not doing anything meaningful to significantly and irreversibly undermine Russia's capacity to fight the war. I want to be clear. I'm grateful for our Western partners for everything they have done. I was in the middle of the process, of all the processes. I know how tough some decisions were. But we reached the point where we have to be honest with each other. And we have to say that the path to victory lays through the loss of Russia.
So what specifically do you want the United States to do? What do you want the West to do? How far do you want them to go?
First and foremost, I want the West to restore its belief in itself. Hearing all the time from various capitals how difficult life is, how big are the problems, with financing, how difficult it is to manage all crises simultaneously. I mean, guys, the West is still the most powerful part of the world. Of course, first, European defense industry should work in full swing, not only for the sake of providing Ukraine with necessary weapons, but also for strengthening defense capabilities of Europe. Second, providing Ukraine with all necessary weapons without any restrictions. The logic of let's not do this because it will be escalatory is flawed. Putin does not need any reasons to escalate. He throws hundreds of missiles and drones on us almost daily without paying any regard to decisions the West is making or is not making. And third, invest in Ukrainian production of weapons. Today, we are proud of making the miracle of reviving our defense industry. So if you cannot send your own weapons, invest money in the production of weapons in Ukraine. Yes, you need to be brave, because bravery is what made the West what it is today. People forget that West became what it is by destroying the axis of evil, which used to be Nazi Germany and Japanese Empire in Asia. And this is where your prosperity and security comes from an act of historic bravery in the first half of the 20th century.
Dmytro Kuleba there on his thoughts on how the West should step up to help Ukraine completely. Well, earlier I spoke to Sky's chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, who's in Kyiv, and asked him how worried the Ukrainians are about the Dnipro attack and Vladimir Putin's warning tonight.
Yeah, and I think there is always a fear here about big missile attacks into the cities across the country. And of course, they've been going on since this war began. Dnipro, it was a big weapon. We know from what President Putin has been saying tonight, apparently an advanced news type of missile. And that will be a concern here. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The air defense systems are struggling already, and any new weapon is actually going to pose real problems for them. Obviously, they will reach out to the allies to ask for assistance, and they've been doing it all the time, and they'll no doubt be doing it again. As I say, though, the country has got used to being under attack the whole time. They are worried, though, by any new developments, and the fear is always about the big missiles coming in. However, there's nothing anyone really can do about it. They just accept it, and people, follow the instructions, go into air raid shelters and get out off the streets if there's definitely a missile on its way. But normally speaking, if the sirens go in a lot of the cities, people carry on as normal. But as I say, something of a fear from what's being said from Moscow tonight.
In my interview with Dmytro Kuleba, he was saying that the West should lift all restrictions on weapons to Ukraine. I mean, that would be seen as a complete escalation, wouldn't it?
It seems to be going that way, but I have to say I think it's escalating already. And in fact, Russia has been part of that escalation since Donald Trump was elected. They've carried out more missiles and strikes here than we've seen for a long time, and huge drone strikes almost on a nightly basis. So there is an escalation taking place. I think a complete relaxation of everything would undoubtedly be an escalation. But I think the allies who are speaking obviously to the Ukrainian government about what they can use and where they can fire them. There's a big change, obviously, with the long-range missiles being used at the moment. They're restricted, well, theoretically, to the Kursk area. That may change as well as we go forward. But to actually just sort of say it's no holds barred, it would be an escalation. Of course, President Putin's already saying that the sort of global nature to this conflict already, and of course North Korean soldiers are now fighting in Russia with the Russians. So it is escalating, and it's happening already.
Well, in the face of new threats, the British Army issued a strong rebuke towards Russia earlier. Speaking at the Defence Select Committee, the Deputy Chief of Defence Staff made clear whether or not Britain was ready for a potential war with Russia.
If the British Army was asked to fight tonight,
yes,
it would fight tonight. And I don't think anybody in this room should be under any illusion that if the Russians invaded Eastern Europe tonight, then we would meet them in that fight.
Lieutenant General Rob McGowan speaking earlier then. Now you're watching The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Still to come, after the International Criminal Court issues arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and others, I'll get reaction from Israel's top UN diplomat.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says it's a dark day in the history of humanity after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for him and others over alleged war crimes. Judges decided there were reasonable grounds to believe Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Galant bore criminal responsibility for using starvation as a method of warfare by repeatedly restricting aid entering Gaza without justification, and or intentionally limiting or preventing medical supplies from entering the Strip. They're both accused of the war crimes of intentionally directing attacks against Gaza's civilian population. Another warrant issued for the arrest of Hamas leader Mohammed Daif for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity on October the 7th. Those charges include murder, extermination, torture and rape. Sky's Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
In northern Gaza today, they buried the dead from airstrikes overnight. Missiles reportedly hit houses near the Kamal Adwan hospital. The area has been the focus of an intense Israeli military operation for weeks to prevent Hamas regrouping. Dozens were reportedly killed. Among them, at least 4 children. Benjamin Netanyahu visited central Gaza on Tuesday and repeated his vow to eliminate Hamas. But he is now a wanted man, formally accused of war crimes. After months of consideration, the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister and former Defense Minister Yoav Galant. It is a hugely significant moment in this long war and for the Israeli state. Netanyahu's office has criticized it as anti-Semitic and absurd. But it is a very serious list of accusations and the first time in the court's history that they have issued arrest warrants for the leader of a Western nation. The ICC has also issued an arrest warrant for Hamas commander Mohammed Deif, one of the masterminds behind October the 7th. Israel says they have killed Deif, but Hamas hasn't confirmed it.
This is a black day in the history of nations. The International Court of Justice in The Hague, which was established to protect humanity, has today become the enemy of humanity.
In theory, at least, Netanyahu and Galant now face arrest if they travel to any of the 124 countries signed up to the International Criminal Court. They include the UK, Germany, Italy, France and Canada. Many have already confirmed they will comply with the court's decision.
It's not at all a symbolic act. If you're a head of state, a head of government, and you have to watch your back where you travel, there is real jeopardy in there.
The United States, however, Israel's closest ally, is not a signatory of the court. The State Department has rejected the ICC's decision, and members of the incoming Trump administration have threatened sanctions against the court.
We fundamentally reject the court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israel officials. The United States has been clear that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over this matter.
Netanyahu sacked Yoav Galant as defense minister just 2 weeks ago. They have become political enemies, but they will now forever be bound by these international arrest warrants, and the charges of war crimes will be part of their legacies, whether or not they ever face trial. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Well, after the ICC's decision, I put their claims of war crimes to Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon.
When you look at the past resolutions of the ICC, for the first time in history, you have a resolution against a democracy. You know, in the past, they used to apply those decisions against murderers, against regimes where there was no democracy, no judiciary systems. But Israel is a strong democracy. We have our own institution, and the fact that they chose to side with the terrorists, that's shameful, and it proves that they use double standards. So when you use double standards against Israel, it shows that you are biased, and that's why we call the countries not to collaborate with this shameful resolution. And I believe that the US will make it very clear in the near future that the US will ban the ICC, will apply sanctions against the ICC, and against those who will collaborate with this ridiculous resolution.
One of the accusations from the ICC is that civilians are being deliberately targeted. Is that untrue?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the fact that the war takes for so long, that is because we maneuver with a lot of caution. We abide to international law, and we could have finished this war much, much faster. But we don't do that because we try to minimize civilian casualties. And the court ignored everything. You know, ignore all the facts that we showed to the international community. Spoke about starvation and about intention, and that's very important to mention, Gillian, because when you look at the leaders who were convicted in the past, always the idea of the intention. And when you come to look at what we are doing today, fighting Hamas, no one can blame us for the intention for harming civilians. Even if that's the case, and some civilians are hurt, and we regret that, we don't have any intention for doing that. We have the intention of dismantling the terror organization that took over Gaza.
I'd like to play you a clip now. These are the words of Professor Nizam Mahmood, a British surgeon who volunteered at a hospital in Gaza and shared eyewitness testimony with Parliament here in the UK. Take a look.
A bomb would drop, maybe on a crowded, tented area, and then the drones would come down and...
Please take your time. We're incredibly grateful that you're making the time to be here today.
The drones would come down and pick off civilians, children. And we had description after description. This is not, an occasional thing. This was day after day after day, operating on children who would say, I was lying on the ground after a bomb had dropped, and this quadcopter came down and hovered over me and shot me. And that's clearly a deliberate act. And I've worked in a number of conflict zones in different parts of the world. I was there at the time of the Rwandan genocide. I've never seen anything on this scale, ever.
Gillian, the blame is on Hamas. And there is a tragedy today in Gaza. No one can argue about that. But the blame is on the shoulders of Hamas, who started this fight
but against us. You heard what he said there, drones picking off children.
Let me finish. And I will be very happy if this distinguished committee will call to speak with the families of the hostages, to see what's happening to the hostages today in the dungeons of Gaza. Young girls being raped, young children who have been deprived from their families for more than a year. So it's tragedy on both sides. But the blame for the tragedy is not on us. It's on the shoulders of Hamas, who invaded Israel, attacked us, and today we are defending ourselves.
But Mr. Danone, you heard the eyewitness account there from that surgeon saying that drones were deliberately picking off children.
No, that's a lie. And I can tell you that. We will never target civilians. We will do everything in our power and knowledge to minimize civilian casualties. We have no intention.
The surgeon is lying.
I don't know if he's lying or not. I can tell you about what we are doing, and we are targeting terrorists. Sometimes when terrorists are hiding behind civilians and they're using them as human shields, and you are familiar with that not only in Gaza, in many other conflict areas, unfortunately you have civilian casualties. But we have no intention to target children.
One of the other charges being put against Netanyahu is that the use of starvation as a weapon of war. Is that the case?
Absolutely not. How can you speak about starvation when we allowed thousands of trucks to come into Gaza? And we have aid, humanitarian aid coming into daily from the several checkpoints into Gaza. So no one can speak about starvation. And I think the UN agencies who operate there, then they know the facts. Yes, you have a problem of distribution because Hamas hijack the trucks and they sell the humanitarian aid. Same thing we saw in Somalia, in other conflict areas, but there is no starvation in Gaza. And we will continue to work together with UN agencies and other NGOs to support the humanitarian needs in Gaza while we fight Hamas.
I want to show some Israeli government statistics now, showing a massive drop-off in food aid in October, dropping from more than 75,000 tonnes in September 2024 to just over 25,000 tonnes in October 2024. How do you account for that dramatic drop?
So first, if you look at the numbers of 25 of November, and you are showing some of them, that you see that the number increased dramatically. And by the end of November, you will see that there was a big step. The problem is usually with the distribution. Many of the trucks pass the checkpoints, but after that, you don't have enough drivers who are willing to take the risk. You have logistical issues. And the main issue is the chaos. There is no law and order, and many of the trucks are being hijacked. We are not limiting the amount of aid coming into Gaza. You know, if any, you can give you a list of countries who are supporting the Palestinians today in Gaza, including Jordan, the UAE, and others. They can tell you the same.
Danny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the UN. This is The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Coming up next, we'll take a look at why Trump's pick for Attorney General, Matt Gaetz, has decided to withdraw.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
A British tourist has died after a mass poisoning at a bar in Laos. 28-year-old Simone White is the fifth person to have died after reportedly drinking tainted alcohol. Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch has this report.
Simone White was 28 years old, a British lawyer enjoying a great adventure in Southeast Asia. But she's now the fifth person to have died after allegedly drinking alcohol shots laced with deadly methanol during a holiday in Laos. Bianca Jones, who was 19 years old and from Melbourne, has also died from suspected poisoning. In Parliament, the Australian Prime Minister paid tribute.
All Australians offer them our deepest sympathy in this time of heartbreak. Bianca's trip should have been a joyous time and a source of fond memories in years to come. Memories that she should have carried with her into the long, bright future that lay ahead of her. It is beyond sad that this was not to be.
Her best friend Holly Bowles is in a critical condition in Bangkok Hospital in Thailand.
Our daughter remains in intensive care unit in critical condition. She's on life support. We'd just like to thank everyone from back home for all the support and love that we're receiving. But we'd also like for people to appreciate right now we just need privacy so we can spend as much time as we can with Holly.
They were staying here at Nana Backpackers Hostel in Vang Vieng when they fell ill.
The hostel has always given out free shots of Lao vodka to our guests as a gesture of hospitality. We got the alcohol from a trusted shop in Vang Vieng. After drinking here, the guests were sober, they looked healthy, and they went out for more drinking.
2 young Danish women and a 56-year-old American man have also died. The area is popular and known for partying, but now there's fear in the air.
Everyone here is very friendly because, like, most of the people here are backpackers, so you share a few drinks with a few people, and I think maybe some of the times you're not really watching how your drink's being made or who has to drink when you're going to the toilet.
It was a trip of a lifetime. So many have shared and can recognise, but this one came with a hidden, sudden and fateful risk. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Bangkok.
Let's move to America now. And when Donald Trump nominated the firebrand Congressman Matt Gaetz to be his new Attorney General, it sent shockwaves through Washington. Gaetz had been the subject of an investigation into federal sex trafficking and drug use. He denied wrongdoing, but the scrutiny imposed on him has proved too much. Today, he withdrew his nomination, saying he'd become a distraction. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has more.
Are you confident you can get confirmed by the Senate? Do you feel like...
It was a great day.
24 hours. It is a long time in politics. Enough time, it seems, for a complete U-turn. One of Donald Trump's shock picks for a key position is down and out. And just a day after he was on Capitol Hill to hear from politicians who would ratify his appointment as America's Attorney General.
Maybe I should serve as Attorney General of the United States.
Matt Gaetz was the pick above all others, which sent eyebrows into orbit.
Abolish the FBI, CDC, ATF, DOJ, every last one of them, if they do not come to heel. Shut up, Gaetz.
Perhaps uniquely unpopular among his peers, but more than that, a character with more than a little baggage. This federal investigation document obtained by the New York Times shows an alleged web of payments between Gaetz and others allegedly involved in sex parties between 2017 and 2020. No charges were ever brought. But behind these doors, the House Ethics Committee was also investigating sexual impropriety, drug use, and other corruption. Trump picked him for his loyalty, the man who would do his bidding.
It was a test, too. Just how much would the Republicans in there conform to Donald Trump's choices? After all, he's returning to the White House with his own criminal convictions. So what if his picks have their own baggage, too?
Well, it turns out it does matter. In a statement, Mr. Gaetz said, "While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition. There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle, thus I'll be withdrawing my name for consideration to serve as Attorney General." From Mar-a-Lago, where Donald Trump continues to select his cabinet picks, he wrote, "I greatly appreciate the recent efforts of Matt Gaetz in seeking approval to be Attorney General. He was doing very well, but at the same time, I did not want it to be a distraction for the administration, for which he has much respect. Matt has a wonderful future, and I look forward to watching all of the great things he will do." With Gaetz gone, focus will now shift to other controversial picks. Fox News host Pete Hegseth is choice for Secretary of Defense, unqualified, say critics, and accused of sexual assault too.
The matter was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you very much.
As scrutiny here continues, it is back to the drawing board for Donald Trump to pick his Attorney General. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
Next, the journalist and filmmaker who became the face of Japan's Me Too moment. In 2017, Shori Ito went public with an allegation of rape against a high-profile colleague and friend of the then Prime Minister. Afterwards, she took on the justice system, and despite not being able to win a criminal conviction, she was able to win a civil case and helped secure changes to the country's laws around rape. Now her story and campaign for justice has been turned into a film, Black Box Diaries.
I have a chance to talk about what happened to me. I'm scared, but all I want to do is talk about the truth. 私自身が全く記憶にないので、起きた時の記憶ははっきりしてます。Many people already witnessed what kind of negative reaction I've got. 証拠がないため厳しいですよね。Our justice system's not working. Without these recordings, no one would believe what I heard.
And director Shori Ito and journalist joins me now in the studio. Welcome. Thanks very much for coming in. First question has to be why you decided to go public back in 2017.
So, I was assaulted back in 2015. And I did everything I could do to report the case to police. But between these 2 years, I realized how there was possible power involvement to cover up the case. So I started doing my own investigation. And when the case was dropped, I wanted to tell other journalists to dig into the case. And also that was the year when we had a first chance to update our rape law, which been there for 110 years. So I wanted pressure for the change.
Did you anticipate the publicity that would surround you, the sometimes notoriety that would come with you coming forward with these allegations?
I've covered sexual violence story before, and I did see what could be a social reaction sometimes. And so I could imagine that, but having that experience on a personal level, it was something, yeah.
What was the experience? What happened?
So I've been receiving calls and texts that I felt like threatened for my life, and it's just general online troll as well. And I couldn't work as a journalist anymore in Japan, so I actually moved here to London to try to cover the story from outside.
And you say that you were fearful for your life?
Yeah.
What were the threats? Why did you fear for your life? What made you feel like that?
There was a direct way of expressing violence towards me on writing, but at the time, in 2017, I didn't know if that's true. Do they mean it? And they also threatened my family. My father's photo was online, and I just felt like it's better to have some distance. And also mentally, I just couldn't bear to start hearing Japanese language anymore because that was the language I've been always receiving. And I also realized that as a Japanese woman growing up in Japan, I didn't really have a language to express my emotion. So for me, being here in London, talking about sexual violence, what the impact was for me in English, being away from Japan, not being able to hear all the trolls in Japanese was also a way of surviving.
Now, the man that you've accused of the crime denies that he's done anything wrong. But where did the idea then come for the documentary, Black Box Video Diaries?
So this film is not about the rape. It's not about what I experienced of the incident or assault. It's about what happened after, what happened during the investigation, what happened in media cover-up, and what happened in our legal system. Every sexual violence happens with power corruption or unbalanced power relationship, and I just felt like I witnessed that. So this film is about me investigating, but also want to tell the story as a point of survivor point of view.
How difficult was it for you to film this? Because it's something you were experiencing and going through. highly emotional, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, it took 8 years to make this film, and we had over 400 hours of footage. But filming it wasn't difficult. It's been down filmed by my friends or who wanted to tell the story. So when something is happening in front of me, I couldn't, of course, direct what was, happening to film. So it was just capturing the moment. But the real difficult moment for me as a director and subject came when I went to editing room, how to tell this story.
What was the difficulty there?
I had to close the line as a journalist to tell one-sided story. You shouldn't tell your own story in the perfect journalistic world, but I couldn't find any other collaborator in Japanese media, so I had to. But I just have to realize, as a filmmaker in documentary film, it is okay to make a film as a survivor too, but to accept that was difficult.
Finally, what do you want people to take away from the film?
I want to say that it was making this film, for me, was very therapeutic in the end. It's hard, but I want to encourage others, even you have a trauma or experience of sexual violence, you can do it. So if you have a trauma, try to make a film.
Shori Ito, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us this evening. Thank you
for having me.
That's all for tonight's programme. The News at 10 is next with Anna Botting, with more on that threat of major escalation from Vladimir Putin. Stay tuned.